In the alien colony of Virith Prime, a strange fear had spread among its shining silver halls. The word Earthling carried a chill that made even brave soldiers whisper. For weeks the council had spoken of a coming exchange. A human male would be brought to the colony for the reproduction program. They said it was to strengthen the species, to mix new DNA, to make future generations stronger. But to most aliens, it sounded like madness. They called the human a wild creature. They said he was violent, unpredictable, and filled with primitive urges. No alien female wanted to be chosen, but the council did not ask. They simply picked names, and one of those names was Lyra. Lyra was a young healer known for her calm hands and gentle heart. Her skin shimmered faintly blue and her eyes glowed softly in the dark. She had never even seen a human before, only old images from the war archives. Those pictures showed humans covered in dirt and blood, holding weapons, shouting with rage. She remembered thinking they looked more like beasts than people. When she received the letter saying she had been selected for the reproductive harmony program, her hands trembled. The words were polite but cold. The message ended with the sentence, "Your cooperation will secure the peace between our species." Peace, she thought bitterly, built on fear. The colony buzzed with talk of the new arrival. In the markets, in the medical bays, even in the prayer halls, everyone had an opinion. Some said humans could tear through metal walls with bare hands. Others said they mated by force and broke their partners. Lyra tried not to listen, but every story made her heart beat faster. Her best friend Sira, a tall, violet-skinned technician, tried to comfort her. "They exaggerate," Sira said. "The council would not bring a danger among us." Lyra looked away. Then why did they assign guards to the breeding quarters? Sira had no answer. Days passed. The announcement came. The human would arrive on the next solar rotation. Lyra could not sleep that night. She sat by her window staring at the twin moons and thinking of all the stories she had heard. Her mind painted 1,000 horrible pictures. A growling creature with wild eyes, sharp teeth, and rough hands. She imagined being trapped with him, unable to escape. Her stomach twisted with fear. Morning came too quickly. The colony prepared for the ceremony. Every corridor gleamed, every officer stood in line. Lyra was forced to stand among the chosen females, wearing the ceremonial white robe that made her feel exposed. Around her, others whispered nervously. She could feel their fear like a heavy fog. Then the ship arrived. It descended slowly through the golden clouds, engines humming softly. The crowd stepped back as the airlock opened. A figure appeared in the light, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark uniform that clung to his frame. His face was shadowed at first, then the light revealed it. He was human, but not the monster they expected. His skin was pale, his hair short and dark. His eyes were calm, steady, and searching. He didn't snarl or growl. He simply looked around, studying everything with quiet curiosity. The soldiers aimed their stun rifles at him, but he didn't react. He lifted his hands slowly to show peace. "I am Ethan Ward, representative of Earth," he said in a clear voice. "I come in cooperation, not in conquest." The translator device echoed his words in the alien language. The crowd murmured. Some seemed surprised, others suspicious. Lyra's heart pounded as she stared at him. He didn't look wild, he looked tired, maybe lonely. There was a strange sadness in his eyes, as if he carried the weight of many worlds. The council members welcomed him formally, speaking in cold tones. They announced that all chosen females would meet him one by one for compatibility testing. The words made Lyra's throat tighten. She wished she could run. When the ceremony ended, she returned to her quarters. She couldn't stop thinking about the human's calm gaze. It didn't match the stories. It didn't match anything. That night, as she tried to rest, she heard voices in the corridor. 2 guards were speaking softly. They say he refused to be sedated during transport. Refused? Why? He said sedation was for animals. The guards laughed quietly. Then we will see if the animal inside him appears soon enough. Lyra pulled her blanket tighter. For the first time, her fear mixed with something else. Curiosity. What kind of creature faced a hostile crowd and still stood with peace in his eyes? When the morning bell rang, she was summoned. Her turn had come to meet the human. Her legs felt weak as she walked through the long corridor toward the testing chamber. Every step echoed against the metal floor. She could feel the guard's eyes watching her. Inside the chamber, the air was cold. The walls glowed faint blue, and in the center stood Ethan. He turned when she entered. For a long moment, neither spoke. She could hear her own heartbeat in the silence. Then he said quietly, "You're afraid of me." His voice wasn't angry. It was soft, almost gentle. Lyra didn't answer. "I would be too," he continued, "if everything I heard about your people came from old war files." She looked up sharply. His words struck deep because they were true. He was not the wild one here. It was they who had treated him like a beast before even knowing him. In that silent room, the first crack appeared in the wall of fear between them. Lyra didn't know it yet, but this meeting would change not just her life, but the fate of both their worlds. Ethan stood still inside the testing chamber, his calm eyes meeting Lyra's frightened ones. The air between them felt heavy, filled with silence and unspoken questions. He could see how tense she was, her hands clutching the side of her robe as if holding herself together. The guards outside watched through the glass wall, waiting for any sign of aggression from him, but Ethan did nothing. He only looked at her with quiet curiosity, as if she were the one holding all the power. He smiled slightly, a small, patient gesture. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. His voice was steady, deep, and strangely soothing. Lyra blinked, surprised by how gentle he sounded. Humans were supposed to bark, to shout, to command. Yet his tone felt human in a way the stories had never shown. She tried to answer, but her throat felt dry. Instead, she turned her eyes away, pretending to study the scanner on the wall. The device beeped as it measured their heart rates. Hers was racing. His was calm. After a long silence, she finally asked, "Why are you here?" "Truly?" Ethan tilted his head, thinking. "Because your leaders asked for human cooperation," he said. "And because I wanted to see what kind of people fear us so much." His words made her chest tighten. Fear them? She had never thought humans could feel the same confusion she did. But when she looked at him again, she saw it clearly. He wasn't dangerous, only misunderstood. The first test began. The scientist entered and placed glowing cuffs around both their wrists. The cuffs linked their pulse patterns. If either acted with violence, both would feel the shock. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Ethan didn't move. He just nodded as if agreeing to the rule. The test required them to perform small interactions. Hand contact, eye focus, shared breathing patterns. To Lyra, it felt like torture. Every time she had to touch him, she expected pain or force. But Ethan's touch was steady and careful. His hand was warm, his skin rough but kind. When she accidentally flinched, he pulled back immediately. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to scare you." The scientists noted the reaction, whispering into their devices. Lyra could hear them saying things like unusual restraint and unexpected compliance. It made her uneasy. They wanted him to act wild to confirm their fear, but he refused to give them that satisfaction. Later, when the scientists left, Lyra and Ethan were alone again. She finally spoke without fear in her voice. "You are not like they said," Ethan smiled faintly. "And you're not like they said either." Lyra frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked toward the glass wall. "On Earth, they say your kind sees us as animals. They say you enslave species. They say you are cold." Lyra's breath caught. "That's not true." He nodded slowly. "I know. Stories go both ways." Something shifted inside her then, a quiet understanding. They had both been victims of lies told by others. And for the first time, she saw Ethan not as an experiment, not as a subject of fear, but as a person. Days passed with more tests. Each one brought them closer. The scientists noticed the results improving. Their energy levels matched. Their emotional sync rate grew stronger. Lyra began to wait for each meeting, not with fear but with curiosity. Sometimes they spoke in whispers while the guards weren't paying attention. Ethan told her about Earth, about blue oceans, open skies, music, and laughter. Lyra told him about the gardens of Virith, where light flowers bloomed in the dark. Their words built a bridge that no test could measure. One evening, during a rest break, Lyra found Ethan sitting alone in his room. He was staring at a small metal pendant in his hand. She asked what it was. He said, "It belonged to someone I lost, someone who believed that peace was worth any risk." Lyra saw the sadness in his eyes and felt something she couldn't explain. It wasn't fear anymore. It was connection. But outside that quiet room, the council watched everything. They did not like what they saw. The human was too calm, too kind. He was not obeying the image they wanted, the image of the wild Earthling. They whispered to each other that maybe he was hiding his true nature. Maybe he was planning something. Lyra didn't know it yet, but those whispers would soon turn into something dangerous. The council would not let a human change their story so easily, and as Ethan looked out the window that night at the alien sky, he could already feel it. The storm was coming. The next phase of the program was called the compatibility test, and it was the most feared part of all. Every pairing before had failed. The subjects had panicked, fought, or refused contact. The scientists called it data loss, but everyone knew what it really meant. Fear. Lyra sat quietly in the observation chamber, her hands folded tightly together. Across the glass barrier, Ethan stood in a plain suit that shimmered faintly with sensors. The lights above them pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. Around them, the council watched, waiting for a reason to call the test off. They wanted proof that humans were too unstable for peace, but Ethan stood calm. His eyes found Lyra's, and even from behind the glass she felt the steadiness of his gaze. It was like an anchor in a storm. The scientist began the countdown. The barrier faded, and Lyra stepped forward. She could hear her heart beating louder than the machine's. When she came close, the sensors reacted. Their readings spiked, lights flashing faster. "Step closer," a voice ordered from the speaker. Lyra hesitated, but Ethan took one slow step toward her. "It's all right," he said softly. "You can stop if you want." His tone made her relax a little. She took a breath and moved forward. The sensors showed their heart rates aligning, their breathing patterns syncing. The scientists exchanged quick looks. This was something they hadn't seen before. The next part required them to hold contact. Lyra raised her hand nervously. Ethan lifted his, and their palms touched through the glowing surface of the biofield. It felt warm, gentle, alive. Her fear melted into curiosity. "You're not afraid," she whispered. "I was," he answered, "but not of you." Her eyes lifted to his. "Then what are you afraid of?" He looked away for a moment. "Of becoming what they expect me to be." His words hung heavy in the air. Lyra understood. Both of them were trapped by the stories others had written about them. She was told to fear him. He was told he would never be trusted. Yet standing there, she felt something honest. The test shifted to the final stage, emotional resonance. They had to share thoughts through a neural link. The scientist placed a small band around Lyra's temples and another around Ethan's. When activated, the devices would transmit emotional waves between them. If either showed hostility, the link would break instantly. Lyra braced herself as the light flared. 1,000 feelings rushed through her mind, confusion, warmth, sadness, memories not her own. She saw flashes of Earth through Ethan's thoughts, oceans crashing under a golden sun, cities rising high, people laughing under falling rain. And underneath it all she felt his pain, the loneliness of being seen as a monster by the galaxy, the weight of trying to prove his species deserved compassion. Tears filled her eyes before she realized it. When the connection faded, she was shaking. Ethan reached out and steadied her. "It's all right," he said again softly. The council ended the test. The scientists began collecting the data, whispering to each other in disbelief. The readings were off the charts. Never before had any pairing shown such strong resonance. When the guards came to escort Ethan back to his quarters, Lyra stopped them. "He's tired," she said. "He needs rest before more tests." The guards looked uncertain but obeyed. Ethan gave her a faint smile as they led him away. "Thank you," he said quietly. That night Lyra couldn't sleep. The link had done something to her. She could still feel the echo of his emotions, still hear the distant roar of Earth's waves in her mind. For the first time, she didn't see him as a human or an experiment. She saw him as a person who had suffered just as much as she had, but the council didn't see it that way. In their private chamber, the leaders argued. Some said the human had manipulated the healer. Others said the test was corrupted. They wanted to reset the experiment and wipe Lyra's memory if needed. Ethan overheard part of it through the vent of his room. He clenched his fists. He knew what they were planning. They didn't want truth. They wanted control. And now that truth had started to grow between him and Lyra. The council would do anything to stop it. As the night deepened, Ethan sat near the cold window watching the twin moons rise. His reflection stared back at him, the face of a man caught between two worlds. He made a silent promise. Whatever they planned next, he wouldn't let them hurt her. Lyra woke to the sound of alarms echoing through the medical wing. The walls pulsed red, warning lights flashing like angry eyes. She rushed out of her chamber, her heart pounding. Guards ran past her carrying weapons. Something had gone wrong. Something big. When she reached the central corridor, she saw Ethan surrounded by soldiers. His wrists were locked in glowing cuffs, but his face stayed calm. The commander shouted orders to restrain him tighter. Lyra stepped forward, but one of the guards blocked her path. "What happened?" she demanded. "He accessed restricted files," the guard said sharply. "The human broke into the central database." Her breath caught. "That's impossible. He doesn't even know our system." The guard didn't answer. Ethan looked up and met her eyes. There was no fear in his expression, only quiet sadness. "I found the truth," he said softly. They dragged him away before she could speak. Lyra stood frozen. What truth could be dangerous enough to cause this chaos? Later that night, she sneaked into the empty lab where the scientists stored their data logs. Her hands shook as she opened the secured console. The files Ethan had touched were still there. She tapped one, and lines of information appeared before her. Her heart sank as she read. The reproductive harmony program was not a peace project. It was a control experiment. The council planned to breed hybrids, half human, half alien, to use as soldiers. They wanted a new army, one that could survive any world, one loyal to no single species. The council had never intended harmony. They wanted ownership. Lyra felt sick. Every volunteer, every chosen participant was nothing but a test subject, including her, including Ethan. She backed away from the screen, trembling. The truth burned in her mind. No wonder Ethan had looked so calm when they accused him. He already knew. He had come here not just as part of the program, but as something else. A spy maybe, or a messenger. Someone trying to expose them, but how? Why risk his life for another species? The next morning, she was called to the council chamber. The tall silver doors opened, and the elders sat in a half circle, their cold eyes fixed on her. "Lyra of Virith," said the eldest. "You were close to the human subject. Did he tell you anything about his actions?" She shook her head. "No, he didn't." The elder leaned forward. "If he speaks to you again, you are to report it." "Do you understand?" Lyra nodded silently. But inside, a new resolve grew. She couldn't let them destroy Ethan for discovering the truth. When night fell, she moved through the dark corridors, avoiding cameras and guards. She reached the holding cell and entered quietly. Ethan was sitting on the floor, his hand still bound, a faint bruise on his cheek. "I read the files," she whispered. "You were right." He looked up slowly. "Then you understand why I came. Why risk yourself?" she asked. "You could have stayed safe on Earth." Ethan gave a tired smile. "Because peace isn't made by staying safe. Someone had to see what they were doing here. Someone had to stop it." She sat beside him, lowering her voice. "They will erase you, Ethan. They'll use your body for their tests. I have to get you out." He shook his head. "If I escape, they'll hide the truth forever. It has to be exposed from within." Lyra hesitated, torn between fear and admiration. He wasn't wild or dangerous like they said. He was brave in a way none of her people understood. "I can help you," she whispered. "I have access to the lab channels. I can send your findings to the Interplanetary Council." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "If you do this, they'll come for you too." "I know," she said, her voice steady. "But I won't live in lies anymore." They worked in silence for hours, crafting the transmission code that could expose everything. Before she left, Ethan looked at her one last time. "Lyra, when this starts, don't stay near me. They'll use you against me." Her heart ached, but she nodded. As she slipped back into the corridor, she felt something new growing in her chest. Not fear, but courage. The next dawn would bring chaos, but it would also bring truth. And for the first time, Lyra believed that one human and one alien could stand together against an entire world of lies. The night was silent on Virith Prime. The silver towers that usually glowed with life were dark, the colony resting under the pale light of its twin moons. But deep below the surface, in the research wing, everything was alive with tension. Security drones moved through the corridors. Guards whispered orders. Something was about to happen. Lyra moved quietly through the shadows, her steps light and careful. Every door she passed was locked under high security. The moment she saw the red signal on the wall, she knew Ethan's cell was near. Her heart pounded as she typed the code she had stolen from the lab earlier that day. The door opened with a soft hiss. Inside, Ethan was sitting on the floor again, his wrists still bound, but his eyes lifted the moment she entered. He had expected her. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly. "They're going to destroy the evidence," Lyra replied. "They're sending everything to the furnaces. The files, the samples, even the scientists who knew too much. They'll erase everything." Ethan stood, his movements slow but strong despite the restraints. "Then we can't wait any longer." She nodded and held up a small device. "This is the transmission core. Once I connect it to the main power grid, it will send your data to the Interplanetary Council. But I can't reach the control hub alone. It's guarded." He gave her a small, determined smile. "Then we go together." They moved through the empty halls like shadows, avoiding patrols. Every sound made Lyra's pulse jump. Somewhere above them, the Council's voice echoed over the intercom, calling for tighter lockdown. Ethan's steps were silent, but his presence gave her courage. He didn't act like a prisoner or a weapon. He moved like someone with purpose, someone fighting for something greater than himself. When they reached the control hub, 2 guards blocked the entrance. Lyra froze, but Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Before the guards could raise their weapons, Ethan stepped forward calmly. "You don't have to do this," he said to them. "You know what your leaders are hiding. You've seen the lies." The guards hesitated, but one of them shouted for backup. In the next instant, everything exploded into motion. Ethan moved faster than Lyra thought possible. He disarmed one guard, then knocked the other to the ground without killing them. His movements were precise, controlled, never cruel. When it was over, both guards were alive but unconscious. Lyra stared at him, breathless. "You could have hurt them." "I don't fight to harm," he said simply. "Only to protect." They entered the hub. The room was filled with glowing panels and streams of alien code running across transparent screens. Lyra hurried to the main console and attached the transmission core. Lights blinked rapidly as the data began uploading. Then the alarms blared again. The Council had discovered them. "Transmission breach detected," a metallic voice shouted through the system. "Seal all exits." Ethan turned toward the door. "They'll be here in minutes," he said. "How long does it need?" Lyra checked the screen. 2 more minutes. The floor trembled as footsteps approached. Guards were closing in. Ethan picked up one of the fallen guard's stun rifles, holding it ready. "When it finishes," he said, "you run." Lyra shook her head. "I won't leave you." He gave her a look that stopped her words. "You must. The truth matters more than me." The door burst open, energy bolts flying through the air. Ethan moved between her and the gunfire, the shots hitting the walls and his arm. He didn't stop. He kept firing back, not to kill, but to buy her time. "Transmission complete," the console announced. Lyra turned to run, but Ethan was still fighting. One shot struck his side and he fell to his knees. Lyra ran to him, grabbing his hand. "Ethan, get up," he smiled weakly. "It's done. They'll know the truth now." Tears blurred her vision. "We can still escape." He shook his head slowly. "Go, Lyra, please don't let this be for nothing." The guard stormed in, shouting. Lyra looked at him one last time, her heart breaking, then ran through the side corridor as he had told her. Behind her, she heard the crash of weapons and the sound of boots. By the time she reached the outer deck, the night air hit her face like cold fire. The stars above seemed sharper, closer. She looked back toward the towers where Ethan was taken. She could still see flashes of light through the windows. She whispered into the wind. He wasn't wild. He was human. The signal from the transmission core shot through the sky that night. A beam of light crossing the stars, carrying Ethan's truth to the galaxy. The colony had tried to bury their lies, but one man's courage had already set them free. The colony of Virith Prime was never the same after that night. The transmission Ethan and Lyra had sent reached far beyond what anyone expected. Across the stars, messages poured in from other colonies, from scientists, from those who had long suspected the truth. The Council tried to block the signal, but it was too late. The truth was already spreading like fire in dry grass. Lyra was forced into hiding. Every corridor echoed with the sound of soldiers searching for her. The Council called her a traitor, accusing her of betrayal against her own kind. Yet she didn't care. She had one thought only: Ethan. He had been captured, wounded, but still alive. Rumors whispered that the human was being held in the deep research vaults. Some said he refused to speak. Some said he was still defiant. Lyra couldn't rest until she found him. Days turned into nights. With help from sympathetic workers and lower-ranked guards, she slipped through the underground tunnels where the council stored its prisoners. When she reached the final chamber, her breath caught. There he was, chained to a metal frame, his head bowed, blood dried on his arm. But his eyes lifted when she entered. "Lyra," he said weakly, "you shouldn't have come back." She knelt beside him. "I couldn't leave you here. The whole galaxy knows what the council has done. Your message worked." He smiled faintly. Then it was worth it. Before she could free him, the sound of marching footsteps filled the hall. The guards had found them. Lyra stood in front of Ethan, her small frame shaking but her eyes burning bright. "You can't stop the truth," she said firmly. "Everyone knows now." The commander sneered. "We'll erase it. And both of you." But then something unexpected happened. One of the guards stepped forward and lowered his weapon. Then another. Within seconds, nearly half of them did the same. The commander shouted, but no one obeyed. A young guard spoke, his voice trembling. "We heard the transmission. You lied to us. You used us. We won't serve murderers." The commander tried to fire his weapon, but Ethan, still chained, pulled the frame so hard it cracked. With one final surge of strength, he broke free, the metal snapping under his grip. He moved with fury and focus, knocking the commander down before he could harm anyone. When the fight ended, silence filled the chamber. The guards looked at him not with fear but respect. Lyra stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. "This isn't just about us anymore," she said. "They'll come after everyone who speaks out." Ethan nodded. "Then we don't hide. We stand together." Word of the rebellion spread quickly. The workers stopped following orders. The scientists sealed off the laboratories. Even the drones, guided by reprogrammed code, turned against the council's security systems. The great city of Vereth began to fall under the weight of its own corruption. Lyra and Ethan led the movement side by side. Their goal wasn't destruction but freedom, for every being forced into silence. They walked through the streets speaking to the people, showing them the truth the council tried to bury. When the council realized their control was slipping, they called for full lockdown. They sealed the city's core and prepared to flee the planet. But by then, even their pilots refused to obey. Ethan stood in the central plaza, surrounded by thousands of aliens who had once feared him. The same people who had called him wild now looked to him for strength. He raised his voice so all could hear. "They said I was dangerous. They said I was a beast. But I was never your enemy. The real danger was the fear they planted in your hearts." His words echoed across the plaza. Lyra stepped forward beside him. "We are different, but that doesn't mean we must live divided. We have seen what trust can do. Let it begin here." The crowd roared in agreement. The banners of the old council fell, replaced by lights shining from every window. The rebellion wasn't built on blood, but on truth and unity. When the final council ship tried to escape, Ethan watched it disappear into the clouds. He felt no anger, only peace. Beside him, Lyra smiled faintly. "You did it," she said softly. He shook his head. "We did it." For the first time in centuries, the people of Vereth stood free.
And at the center of it all stood one human who had been called wild.
Yet had shown them what humanity truly meant: courage, mercy, and hope. As dawn broke over the shattered skyline, Ethan and Lyra looked toward the rising light. The rebellion had ended, but their story had just begun. The sun rose slowly over Vereth Prime, painting the broken towers in shades of gold and silver. Smoke still drifted from the city's upper levels, but for the first time in years, the air felt alive with freedom. The old council was gone. Their laboratories were silent. Their banners, symbols of fear and lies, had been torn down by the very people they once ruled. Ethan stood at the edge of the Grand Plaza, his uniform torn and stained, his hand still marked by the battle that had freed the colony. Around him, thousands of aliens worked together, rebuilding, clearing rubble, helping the injured. They were no longer divided by species or ranks. They were one people, joined by the same desire to live free. Lyra walked toward him, her soft blue skin reflecting the morning light. She had traded her healer's robes for simple working clothes, her hands covered in dust. Yet her eyes still carried that same calm glow he had seen the first day they met. When she reached him, she smiled faintly. "It's over," she said quietly. He looked at the horizon. "No," he answered. "It's beginning." They stood side by side, watching the workers rebuild the colony. The streets that once echoed with orders now rang with laughter and song. Children played freely in open courtyards. Drones that had once served as guards now carried supplies and food. But peace was never simple. Reports came from distant colonies that other councils were still enforcing the same cruel programs. Virith's rebellion had sparked hope, but it had also drawn attention. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see what humans and aliens would do next. Ethan and Lyra became symbols of the new age. Together they spoke before the Interplanetary Council, the same organization that had once approved the forced reproduction program. The hall was vast, filled with leaders from dozens of worlds. Some looked curious, others looked afraid. Ethan spoke first. His voice was steady but filled with quiet fire. For centuries we have feared what we do not understand. We called it survival, but it was control. We built walls and called them peace, but peace built on chains will never last. Lyra stepped forward beside him. Our two species began this program with fear in our hearts. But fear is not the end. We have seen that courage and trust can grow even where hatred was planted. Let this be the start of something better. There was silence. Then one by one the delegates began to stand, first a few, then many. The vote passed unanimously. The reproduction program was abolished on every world that still practiced it. That night, under the twin moons of Virith, a celebration filled the colony. Lanterns floated into the air, carrying the wishes of both humans and aliens together. Ethan and Lyra stood among them, surrounded by the people they had helped free. The air smelled of flowers, the same kind that once grew in Lyra's healing garden. "Do you think they'll ever see us as equals?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at her. "They already do. They're dancing together, aren't they?" She smiled. "Maybe that's how peace really begins." He nodded. "Not with armies or speeches. With people choosing to stand beside each other." As the music played, the crowd gathered around them. The elders of Virith, now chosen by the people, stepped forward and spoke the ancient words of unity, a ritual once used only between their own kind. That night, for the first time in history, it was spoken for a human and an alien. Lyra's hand trembled as she reached for Ethan's. Their fingers touched, and the crowd went silent. The ritual light glowed around them, binding not by law or force but by choice. Two beings from different worlds, once told to fear each other, now stood as one. When the ceremony ended, the crowd cheered. Some wept. Others simply looked to the stars as if realizing for the first time how wide and bright the universe truly was. Later, as the celebration quieted, Ethan and Lyra walked to the edge of the city. The field stretched endlessly before them, glowing faint blue under the starlight. Lyra looked up. "Your people will come one day. Will you go with them?" Ethan smiled gently. "Not yet. There's still work to do here, and I promised someone I'd help her grow a new garden." She laughed softly, her eyes shining. "Then we start tomorrow." They stood together, the human and the alien, watching the stars that had once separated their worlds now shining over both of them. The story of the wild Earthling spread across the galaxy, not as a tale of fear, but as a legend of hope. Because one man had chosen kindness over violence, and one alien had chosen trust over fear, and together, they changed the meaning of humanity forever. And somewhere far above, the stars seemed to burn a little brighter, as if they too were watching the dawn of a new beginning.